30th, 1997. We are in Columbus, Ohio, with the 42nd reunion of the 12th Armored Division. My name is Michelle Colvin. We are here with Carlton Figg. Do you prefer Carl or Carlton?
Carlton.
Okay.
Or Roane, doesn't make any difference.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. First off, why don't you tell us what division you were from?
12th Armored Division. I started with the 43rd Armored Regiment in the 12th Armored Division in October 1942.
Okay.
Recon Company.
Okay. And let's basically just start from the beginning. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Prince George County, Virginia in 1919, September the 12th.
Okay. And let's talk about your parents a little bit. What did your father do?
My father was a farmer. Farmed all his life.
Did he enjoy it, or was it just...
Oh, yes. He loved farming. And one brother, two sisters.
Okay. What was your mother like?
My mother, wonderful. My mother was one of 9 children who raised two. Her family raised 2 nieces, so there were 11 in the family, and her father was a storekeeper. He started his store when he met my grandmother and said, "It's time for us to get married. I found a place to start my business." And he built a store and built a home and raised a family. And both of them, my grandmother and grandfather, both died very young. And my mother helped take care of the children as they grew up. And so my mother was my mother, along with the mother to her brothers and sisters, the younger one. So my mother was a great person. So was my father.
So how many children were there at one point in your family?
In my family, well, I only had 4. It was four brothers, two sisters and 1 brother and myself. 4. And
what would you do for fun on the farm? Do you remember activity and stuff you would do as a child?
As a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy life. We had a good time. You know, the funny thing is that no one told us that we were poor. You know, they forgot to tell us that until way down in the 35 or 36, you know, when things started getting better. Then they told us we were awful poor back there, you know. The reason we didn't drive a car because we didn't have a license for it. But we didn't know that. They didn't tell us that at that time, you know. Mm-hmm. The reason we didn't have bread is because we couldn't get to the store, you know. Mm-hmm. But we played ball, we went fishing, and my father loved sports and loved children. And so all the neighbors gathered in our yard to play tennis or volleyball or cards, croquet, and things of that nature. And when he died, there were children that I never knew who they were, but in the house playing cards with him the week he died. Mm. He loved children, and the children loved him. Yes.
Fun. So the Depression really didn't affect you too much?
We didn't know. Yes, it affected us a whole lot, I'm sure, really, you know. Our sisters went to college, but they had to borrow money, or they had to sell a mule to go pay the tuition. But my parents said that they should go to school, you know. That was the main thing. Everybody had to go to school. That was important. We didn't have electricity. We had gas, old carbide lights. You don't know what that's all about. You may know, I don't know. But in those days, we had carbide lights, and all you had to do was flick a switch, and you had nice soft lights. And A telephone that rang, you know, the crank. And we lost all that during the Depression. I had to go back to, I think it was 2 people on the line for 15 miles. And we had to go back to the old lamp. And it was after the war before we got electricity and telephone and everything back in. It was tough on us, yeah. But we didn't really notice it too bad, I don't guess.
What education did you complete before the war?
High school, and got a couple of years of college. And the bank foreclosed on me and I couldn't finish.
What were you studying?
Studying agriculture, by the way. And I had to quit, and I went into industry. I was fortunate enough to get a job. But the bank foreclosed on me. I wasn't but 19 years old. And, you know, the bank said you're supposed to be 21. They didn't check, and I didn't tell them that I wasn't 21. And when they found out, well, they got me out of school real quick, and I had to go to work and pay it back. I didn't know how much. But that's the way it went.
What do you remember about the day you heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Very interesting. I lived close to Fort Lee. And Fort Lee was being built at that time. And I was on the way to right through Fort Lee. And I had picked up a soldier going into Petersburg on a Sunday afternoon. And the radio was on. And it came over the radio, and we stopped dead still in the middle of the road to listen to the report. And the soldier wanted to go back to the camp because he didn't know what to do. And so I had a date, so I went on. I didn't. Why worry about this now, you know? So that I remember quite well when I got the first announcement on the Pearl Harbor.
How did your parents and the family react?
Same way, you know. My brother and I were thinking about going into business, but we knew that we might get drafted. We were both given a draft notice back in September for the Pearl Harbor in December. So we didn't go into business. And so really we knew what we had to, something down the line was going to happen. So really, he joined the Navy, and I was going to join the Army. But I never did get in the Army at that time because I was looking for maybe get into some kind of special work. I wanted to get in the Air Force or field that I felt like I could learn something to use after I got out of the service. And I didn't get it. He did. I didn't. And so I waited, and about a month after he went in, I was drafted, so it wasn't much difference. And Uncle Sam said, greetings.
So where did you go from there?
I was drafted into the 4th Armored Division. And at that time, the 4th Armored Division was at Watertown, New York, which is now Fort Drummond. We were taken in as replacements, and it was in February, 1st of February, 42. We went in, and I guess Sunday morning we got to the post, and Sunday afternoon we went on the Canadian border as on guard duty. So really we didn't have any basic training. We came back two weeks later, I guess. We were right there for about 2 weeks, most of 2 weeks. When we came back, we were pretty much the whole unit, most of the unit was taken out, except we were G Company, the 56th Infantry or something. I've forgotten that number now. But they were sent to different categories, and for most of them went to 4th, 6th, 8th Army. I don't know. It was at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, and a lot of them went out, and we stayed. We were put on duty, notice to go too, but we hadn't had any training. So we went up and said, "Look, we haven't had any training." They said, "Oh, how did you get on these orders?" You know, we don't know how we got on these orders. Well, we took you off, and we put them back over here, and so there were 6 of us that were inducted, and 6 of us stayed. After everybody left, the company commander, who then was a captain, called us in and said, "Next 2 weeks we're going to be getting in a whole company. Everybody's going to go back into the rest of the regiment. We're going to take all the rest of our company and put them in the regiment except a few of the non-coms, and you 6, and y'all will stay in this unit, and when we get in the new men, then y'all will start teaching them basic training." And said, "You'll teach this one, and you'll teach this, and you'll teach this. And now you have 2 weeks to learn it." And so we had a first sergeant and a staff sergeant and 2 buck sergeants. And they taught most of the subjects that, as far as marching and this type of thing. And we taught most of the things like machine gun and mortar and map reading and this type of drill, rifles and this type of thing. So it was excellent training for us, and yet we didn't really go through basic training ourselves, and that's how we got our basic training, teaching it while going through the course.
Sounds like a good deal. Really good deal.
Very good. We were very happy because there was 6 of us that went in from Fort Lee, Virginia. The 6 of us got all sergeants at the same time. We jumped corporals, and we ran a unit. You know, why do you want to move?
Yeah.
We had a real home, but that didn't last long.
So where did you head after New York? Where did you go after New York?
We went to I went to OCCS. We did not apply for OCCS. We were ordered to go to OCCS, really. And then we applied. The company command asked us to, and we did what he asked us to do. And out of the 6, 3 of us went to OCCS. 1 was discharged, 1 was put on special duty because he had a sciatic nerve problem, and 1 was too heavy, and he stayed in the 4th Army Division and was the first sergeant of that company all the way through the war. And the other 3 of us went to OCCS.
And how do you feel about that?
Fine. Enjoyed it. Had a good time. We were in very good shape. You know, we were physically in extremely good shape. I'd had the pleasure of while I'll use the word Pine Camp, of working that spring and summer with 3 people from, they were juniors, between the junior and senior year at West Point. And they were in our unit, and we worked with them and training them along with us. And we got into real good shape with them. And so when we went in OCS, we didn't have any trouble in physical training at all. We thought it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you there?
90 days.
Okay. And then, let's see, where did you go after that?
I got lost. You don't want that far. I went to Campbell.
Yeah?
I went to Fort Campbell.
Okay.
Camp Campbell.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to tell us about that, or?
What happened, I was assigned, when we finished OCS, I never finished OCS really. The crazy, the thing that happened. The Army is very interesting, and if you ride with it, you really have a good time. 20 out of 400 were selected to go to the Rangers, and I was one of the ones that was selected. I was the little fella. Two of us were just little fellas. The rest of them were big men, And so they graduated us 3 or 4 days before time to take a test and all finished. So we got our commission and everything early. And then they didn't do anything with us. And then after a week, 2 weeks really, then they reassigned everybody except 2 of us. And we got lost for a month. and we had an opportunity to work with General Ennis. Now he's in this program. He's in the 92nd, not in the 92nd, the 12th. You see his name show up once in a while in the 12th Armored Division. And several other colonels. We didn't have anything to do, and so he asked of us. We'd help. They were working on developing programs for basic training. And so we worked with them and really enjoyed it. And we had a chance to work with the people down at Fort Knox. And then they found us, and we went to Fort Knox. Went to Fort Campbell. And the 12th Armored was just organized, and I got in October, which some of them came in September and some in October. A few of them may have got there in August, I don't know. Yeah.
So how did you feel about Camp Campbell?
I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. We had, at that time, we had the 2 armored regiments, 94th and 93rd, 44th and 43rd. We were in the 43rd. We had a separate recon company. It was a big company. We had 9 officers and 200 men. I said 200, I think it was 990 something, but pretty close to 200 men, which was rather large. We also had the duty of training all of the recon people for basic training in headquarters, maintenance battalion, supply battalion, and the whole staff. Then the tank battalions in the regiment had recon platoons, and we had to train them too. So we had a chance to work with some 400 people, and it was real good. At that time, we had a fellow named Captain Green, and this group is what we worked with for a good while, and got about halfway through the basic training. And when Green left, and Captain Bartholomew came in, but we had a real good team, and everything worked real smooth. Captain Bartholomew came in. He was a tanker. His training was tanks. And we went a little further into the training, and that brought us into almost summertime, and then it wasn't long after that, in the fall, we went on Tennessee maneuvers. At the end of Tennessee maneuvers, then they really tore us all to pieces. They triangulated the division. I know you've heard this a dozen times, but we had what was known as the 92nd Battalion. The 92nd Battalion, Recon Battalion, didn't have, well, they just had A, B, C, and D companies. And they did what was called long-range reconnaissance. And if you know anything about your history, you know that during the North African War in the desert, It was long-range reconnaissance, 20 miles, 30 miles. Reconnaissance was out looking for troops in the desert. Well, all that ended. And when we finished Tennessee maneuvers, it all ended with the 29th, with the 92nd. When we were trying it, we came down to what was known as short-range reconnaissance. And the Recon company in the 44th and the 43rd were the only two that had experience in short-range reconnaissance. When I say short-range reconnaissance, we were working right in front of the combat unit. The combat command or the regiment would be right here, and we'd be right in front of it. Maybe a mile, maybe half a mile, but we were right in front of it. It wasn't very far in front. Well, then we became a part of the 92nd, and we changed it from a battalion to a squadron, and became ABC, and we became D, and 44th Company became B. So then we were stepchildren to the 92nd. We had a little trouble to start with, but it didn't last long. And we did very well. And we were down at Berkeley, Abilene, and they took these ATT tests that they had to take, and the 92nd passed very well. And I was sent to Kansas, to Fort Raleigh. There were 4 of us in the squadron that was sent to Fort Raleigh for short-range reconnaissance, teaching short-range reconnaissance. It was a kind of a new game. And I don't really know, it was a gap in there as far as I don't know what happened to the 12th. I know they went on another maneuvers and they had to take other ATT tests, and they lost a general, and things happened, and you probably know more about that situation than I do. And in July, or 1st of August, we were called back, and then we were loading, when I got back, we were loading tanks, armored cars, and all on the railroad to head for Camp Shanks and overseas.
Do you remember going into Abilene at all?
Oh, yes. Loved Abilene. Abilene was real nice. People were real nice. We enjoyed them. I believe I was talking to you that we met some lovely people in the little town of Albany. Mm-hmm. Now, the way we met them was they were visiting people that were, it seemed like the man was a minister. I don't know whether he was, I don't remember now, time has blocked me out. But I know we had dinner with them, and then they invited us to Albany. And they were so lovely. They invited us, we went out there, I guess, for once a month, I guess, for a couple, 3 months. In fact, I wrote to one of the girls until after the war was over. But I couldn't keep writing after that.
Okay, so then from there you went to Camp Shanks.
Mm-hmm.
And how long were you there?
Very short.
Yeah.
Just a very short time. I don't know whether a week, no more a week, just a few days.
How was the ship ride overseas?
Fine. We were on a Naval Transport, and I don't think there was maybe I don't remember, but I think it was only less than about 4,000 troops on that Naval Transport. I'll tell you an interesting thing, which hasn't got anything to do with this. We were on board ship, and our unit, Captain Bartholomew, was more or less put his provost marshal on board ship, and all of us officers were helping him. We were assistants, I guess you'd call it. And so we explored the ship, you know, went everywhere. And one day I went up on top deck, and just as I stuck my head up on top deck, I got hit with a medicine ball right in the face, bow. And I don't remember the admiral's name now, but he was the commodore for the convoy going over. And he was up there taking exercise of that ball. And he said, you come on up here and play with me. And you bring so many men up tomorrow, and every day we had to go up and play exercise with him. And Wilkie, I remember Wilkie's son, you remember? You don't remember. Wilkie ran for president. And his son was an aide to this admiral. And we used to go up and play ball with them all the way over, you know, except when they were dropping bomb depth charges as we went along overseas. Yeah. But they just threw that in for something extra. So yeah, we had a good time going over.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Did you get sick at all, or?
No.
Good.
No.
Good. So where did you land once you got over to?
Actually, we landed in Bristol. Well, it's not Bristol. What is it? Bristol. I don't know whether it's called Bristol or not, but Bristol is the closest town. It's only just a short ways. And when the 12th Armored Division landed, there was no one place for them to go, and we landed all over England. And we happened to land in Bristol, or whatever that port is, very close to Bristol. And they started unloading the ship, and I was left on board with 2 men to make sure everything was unloaded, which was real nice. Then we were supposed to catch a train that night down to Reddington or some town and catch a division. Well, they didn't finish unloading that night until the next night. And so then we had a time finding a division. So you know how when you go to England and you can't find anyone that knows where the division is, you ask a cab driver, and they always know. Well, we didn't ask her, we asked a bus driver. And so the bus driver took us out to Windmill Hill where we, and sure enough, we got there about an hour before the troops came in. I don't know how he knew where we were supposed to go, but we were in England for about 30 days. I reckon a little better.
How were the living conditions?
Better than sleeping outdoors. We were sleeping in tents. They weren't bad. We had a good time. Well, it wasn't a good time. We worked. It was hard work. You know, we had a lot of jeeps. Recon has a lot of jeeps, and so every unit has to get a lot of vehicles in. And we had to get them in, and we had to put machine guns on them, put carriages, racks on them to put their bags in, and we had to do all that in a short length of time. And so we were busy, but we had a good time doing it. We got a chance to get into London and got around and see some folks.
Can you tell us a little bit more in detail about London?
Yeah, it's got a triangle for a square, and in the night when it's dark, it doesn't work too well. If you go down 3 sides and try to find something that's on a square, it doesn't work. You're back where you started from. I walked it twice before I found out it wasn't square, it was a triangle. I'm just kidding, I don't know. We were supposed to go to a hotel, you know, and it was supposed to be around the corner, and we did. We wound back in the same place. It was picking at the squares, picking at the circles, that's where we were. We didn't have a chance to see a lot of London. It was terrible. A lot of bombing, a lot of buildings torn down. We got knocked on the head one night ourselves while we were in London. It was that close. But it wasn't close enough to bother us. We got back in bed and went to sleep.
So, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the first battle that you came to? First fighting.
The first battle we came to was in Normandy. It wasn't a battle at all. But the first mission was Thanksgiving. There was a big battle, enemy firing across the road down in Normandy. And I was sent down there with my platoon to check it out and see what it was. And I went down there, and they thought it was the Germans trying to get ashore. And really what we found out, it wasn't the Germans at all, it was the Free French set up a firing range, firing across the main highway instead of turning up the other way and shooting out into the English Channel. But I didn't know that. And so my first experience turned out to be nothing, but I was just as scared if it had been something really important. Yeah, but I remember that very well. No, that was really, I don't guess you'd say that was my first combat experience. I guess my first combat experience really was and I don't know where we were, but I think it was the 45th Division, 44th, 45th Division. We were sent up into the 44th, and they were very well beat up. The artillery was coming in on them, and they'd been in line for a good while, and they were very beat up. And the Combat Command B was sent up behind them. And my little platoon, and what I say, I'm just talking about my little platoon, I don't know what everybody else was doing. Everybody else had the same missions, you know. It was pretty well divided. What I say is what somebody else was doing the same thing I was all the way down the line. I wasn't doing it more than anybody else. It was just, I tell my side, somebody else tell that. But I had to go in and find this group, and because they wanted to talk to somebody in the Recon. And I did. I went into this lieutenant colonel was in a pillbox, right in the edge of the woods, and the big slope going down and hills going up, and I guess it must have been a good quarter of a mile, 350 to 400 yards, and then the road cross on the top, and the road going right on up to it. And he gave me orders to take my armored cars and go down this road and up to the road above that and to see what was up there. And I told him I wouldn't go. I told him I'd wait until night, I'd go up there and look, but I would not go across. That the road was mine, the whole field was mine, and it was impossible for us to go across. That you could take men and probably go far enough off of the road and go around, but you couldn't go up or close to that road. It would be mine. No, you got to go. And he did. He gave me direct orders, and I just walked out. I was real shaky. But I went back, and I told the colonel what I had done. I guess it was me, whoever was the Combat Command colonel. And he said I was absolutely right. He supported me all the way. And so we did. We went in that night under cover, and we found, rightly so, the enemy. And the next morning, when the engineers went in it, the whole area was mine. And if I had gone in there, we would have gotten all the vehicles blown up. So yes, that was my first combat. I got one artillery round shrapnel went in my helmet and came around and nipped me right on the forehead. And between the perspiration and a little blood, trickled down my nose like scared everybody to death. And mom in the car thought I was dying. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know I'd been hit. And of course, I never turned it in. But that was my first experience in combat. But those people, I felt sorry for them. Oh, they'd been under that, and artillery was hitting those trees, you know, and coming down on them.
What, describe a little bit about what your position was, what your responsibilities were.
Pretty much, in most all of our missions, we more or less had to find out what the situation was. We had to find the enemy or find out what the conditions of the road or terrain and report it back. Now, in the 7th Army, most all of the 7th Army was stretched. We did not have a whole lot of infantry or anything else to cover all the ground. So a lot of times we were given missions to go and get to an objective, and we might find out what it was, but normally you would pull back and let the infantry go through. We had to hold or go ourselves. And so really, we had to do a lot of it. We had to do reconnaissance, and also we had to hold, and we had to fight sometimes. And so really, it was a pretty much mixed bag. We were extremely fortunate. And I said this for the whole 12. We were together from fall of 42 all the way through the war. And we knew each other pretty well. We worked with each other. We knew pretty much what the capabilities of each other were. And I have to give that credit for not having any more casualties than we did. Really, I don't think it was A troop, B troop, C troop, or D troop that had any more line of combat than the rest of them. It just depends on who's doing the talking, you know. If you're talking to the infantry, they were out front. If you're talking to the tanks, they were out front. But I'm afraid that most of the time, the cavalry develop a situation, and if it could get back, they got back. If it couldn't get back, then the infantry or somebody went through and took it, because they wasn't a fighting outfit. We didn't have enough people. We could only limited what we could do. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
You are, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What do you What can you tell us about Captain Bartholomew?
Captain Bartholomew was a very even-tempered, very considerate individual. Knew how to handle tanks and people. Enjoyed working with him. He and I got along fine, you know. I always fussed at him. He was a tanker, and he worked with the tanks. When he hit the ground, I had infantry training when I first went in service, so I was in charge of the troops as infantry. And he stood back in the tank. And so we worked as a team. And we had a very, very fine relationship there. And so he thought a lot of the men. He worked with the men. He worked with the officers. He'd support you. I don't know what else I can say, except he was a fine man.
Okay. So, tell us about, did you have any involvement with any of the civilians?
Not really. I guess the closest I came was civilians. We captured and I say we, I mean probably the whole 12th Armored Division. Each one thought they had done it, captured it by himself. The Landsberg concentration camp, I don't think it was called Landsberg, I think it was another name, but it was in the vicinity of Landsberg. And we worked with the civilians there for a little while, but most of the time it was with officers, and and very little limited with the officers. But that was a little bit. And I guess the biggest part of working with the civilians was after we crossed the Danube. When we crossed the Danube, and there's a lot of mix-up in my mind and a lot of other people's mind. When it went across the Rhine, I know your records show that some infantry unit went straight on through in between two German units that were holding the mountain. I was not there, but I've been always told that it was a Recon outfit. And B Troop boys said, sure we were. There was no one in front of us. We went through. I don't know what they're talking about. So last night, Bodecker, I don't know if you met Sergeant Bodecker or not. Bodecker said, sure, we went through. And no one was in front of us. Well, I didn't think they were, but I didn't know, and I don't know yet whether it is or not. But I didn't go across the bridge. The supply line, it came down on a very narrow road, and they had to find somebody to get back. And I drew the mission of going downstream and finding a road that went back. And in so doing, there was a bridge, and it was a DP camp on this side of the river. There was a walled city on the other side. I don't know what the name of it was. I should remember it. But it was a good-sized bridge. I had a boy named Daviduk who could speak Russian. He started talking to those people, and they said, it's mine. He took those men, and they went under and took all the demolition out, and there was a little wagon there. They put in the wagon, and the men pulled it down the stream. We had a boy who was pretty good with demolition. He blew the bridge, blew the ammunition up, and it shook the city right good. Because they had to get rid of that before the men could, the trucks could go back the other way. Mm-hmm. And when it did, men came out with white flags across the bridge. Well, we took one section in, which was armored car and 2 jeeps, and went in. And I worked with the civilians there in setting up they surrendered the whole town. It was a very good sized town. And the reason was because they had a hospital there, and it was full of soldiers. And I enjoyed working with them. And Red Cross, I guess it must have been 3 or 4 Red Cross people, and we did what we could to secure the city. They took all the ammunition and put them in wagons and put them in a safe place, and they put white flags at every entrance of town and told them to wait till somebody came, and then I got out of town. In the meantime, we had notified the American people to come on in and look after it. But it was the next day before they got there to take over. And I guess that's the only 2 times really I ever worked with the civilians at all.
Tell me how you were involved with Battle of Herasan.
That was interesting. At Christmas, we'll start back at Christmas. We were dug in on Christmas Day, and the 36th Infantry or something dug it behind us, and we were holding, and we pulled out Christmas night. It was about midnight when we pulled out. We had Christmas done and everything on the line, which was real nice. And we pulled out about midnight, and the Germans came in and they patted our vehicles on the side. No one fired at anybody. And we pulled out the left, and we were under the impression we were going to support Patton. But we traveled all the rest of that night and up until noon the next day. They turned us around the middle of the road and brought us right back because the Germans had come in and filled it in. We came back into the same area, and then we stayed there for a couple of days. And then basically what we did was do some mapping, do some recon and made some maps of some roads. And then all of a sudden they said, move into this area of Herasan. Well, it was snowing like a dickens. And I remember going in and leading the troops in with a handkerchief. And I was walking in front of a Jeep. And I led them down the wrong path. We had to back them back out after we were across and put them in a railroad track before we did. But I got them back out and went down. And we stayed in a big old building, which they told me it had a big red cross on it next morning. Which we weren't supposed to be in. I don't know how many people stayed there, but D Troop stayed there. And about 5 o'clock that morning, I guess, we got in around noon, around 12 o'clock at night, and about 4:35, Bartholomew said, take a patrol and go down and find out what's down there. On the canal, I said it's only a Corps reconnaissance says there's only about 300 poorly organized German troops, and there could be sailors and whatever. So we go down there, and it's foggy, snow on the ground, and it's only about 6 of us, maybe 8, not many. And we walked down and we could hear them talking. And we walked up to a point where we could see them. And they could see us. And then we could see the 88s sticking over the banks. So we said, don't fire, don't take your gun off his shoulder. I don't care what happened, turn around slowly and let's go back. And we did. And we got halfway across that plain. And they started firing at us. Well, they weren't hitting it. They weren't trying to hit us. And we got back. No one paid any attention to us. We reported it. No one won't believe us because they said they had all that. Now, we had all 12 armored cars. They gave us a platoon of medium tanks. And we lined them all up, and at 7:15 we opened fire on Herasan. They didn't even have the courtesy to fire at us with a rifle. We tried to tell them that they were loaded with for everything they had, and they didn't even fire at us. And see, that's when they jumped off on the side, and that's when they got the devil locked out of them on both sides. And we didn't even get anything at all. We didn't get anything. And that was my activity with the Herasan. From then on, we were dug in. We did some recon work when the engineers went in and dug a hole. I'm not sure I went with them even when they went down to, I know I was part of the way down, but I don't think I went down to where the bridge was, where they were putting it in. And as soon as they got the engineers in there, they got out of there. They were fighting. You won't find some of this in your history, I'm sure, because it's changed a whole lot. But that's what I know about it. And then we set up this line with all the whole squadron, and they linked from one end to the other. I don't know how long that line was, almost a mile long, I reckon. It was a long line, and we had all the batteries, but the troops, I mean, all the way across. And the Germans would come in at night and clip the wires around our foxhole, and then slipped back in the woods behind us. But what they didn't know was a real small piece of woods. And so when the sun came the next morning and our wires were cut with communication, we'd go back in the woods and capture him. And we did that several times while we were there. But we stayed there for 2 weeks. We lost a lot of men from exhaustion. We just played out. And did you talk to Keep, Richard Keep? I think he did, probably. He was talking about that the other night. He said, do you remember when one of them passed out? I said, yeah. He was standing up talking to us, and he just passed out. Boom. And we put him in his Jeep, and he took him back to headquarters. And, of course, they gave him a big old pill by the side of his finger and slipped him under the table and left him for 24 or 48 hours, let him sleep, and then brought him back online. But we lost right many during that time, and which that's what they did. They put him to sleep for a little while and they came on back online. And then, at the end, the last day we were there, the tanks came across the line. Now we'll talk about Captain Bartholomew again. The headquarters got kind of mixed up. It was a kind of scary time. No one knew exactly what was happening, and so headquarters wasn't giving any really orders. And Bartholomew and myself went up to headquarters, and nothing was going on, and so we went to every unit, and Captain Bartholomew put every one of them, A, B, C, and D, back in line. But they were giving up, and one of the company commanders even burned a Jeep up. That's how serious they thought it was. The Air Force knocked out 2 tanks after they crossed the canal. And before those tanks were knocked out, one of the commanders put a incendiary grenade on top of his gas tank and burned his Jeep up. You know, that's how serious it was. But I give Bartholomew credit for putting everything back in line and holding until that night when the infantry came in and relieved us, and then some tank destroyer battalions came in.
So were you
I was in there. I was just one of many,
yeah.
and we're all doing the same thing.
Were you injured besides that little scratch on your head, or
When?
did you?
Oh, I got shot in the leg one time, but I never reported it. It was a bazooka. This was down. This was on a march to the Rhine, and a German came in on a Jeep, on a motorcycle, came around a corner in town and shot right down the street. And one boy got hit in the shoulder, one got hit in the stomach, and 2 or 3 of us got hit. But none of us, seriously, I reckon, yeah, I still got a little scar there. My pants were folded, like this, it went through. And a little old Panzer, it was a little old Panzerfaust. And the thing is not, the skin on it is not as thick as your fingernail. But the power of that thing, it picked one of the boys up, he was falling this way, and it picked him up when it hit him and threw him on his back. Now, he didn't get a scratch, but he was blue from here up. One boy got hit, and it went through the pericardial, didn't go through the pericardial wall, went through the outer skin and the fat. And you could look at it and see a little flesh that blew inside of his fingernail, like a little hole. And his stomach. Put him on a stretcher, and he stayed there for a couple of days until we could get him back. But, yeah, we didn't see a medic,
Yeah.
There was some that came along later, but we didn't see him. If I had known that we were going to get a chance to get home early or something, yeah, I probably would have. No, I was just thankful that I wasn't hurt. Very
Um,
thankful.
Tell us your views of General Patton's command.
It was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed. I talked to him on the telephone, on the radio. We had never worked with anybody like that. We do this mission in Trier somewhere way up here. It was 100 and some miles down here that we were supposed to go. We all thought they were nuts. Because we were down here and they pulled us out. That we were right at Bitchy. And they pulled us out and said, "Oh, we'll get back down." And the first thing we hit, it was at night. We hit this crossroad and it was very heavily loaded with anti-aircraft and 88 ground mounts and machine guns. We got it pretty well developed as what was in there, and then we got out of there and reported it. And really, we pulled our bedrolls out, and we were going to get a good night's sleep because with Patton, it would take a day and a half to get through that thing. We weren't interested in another day's work. We would get a good night's sleep. Within 4 hours' time, they told us the crossroads was clear. They had put an infantry division down the crossroads and a tank battalion, and they cleaned it out. And we moved before daylight. We were gone. We didn't get about a couple hours sleep. We were gone. That was Patton, and that worked the whole time we were in there with Patton. And that's why I think Patton honored us because we did. We did that not once but 2 or 3 times during the time we went down. We had a lot of interesting things that happened on that trip. Very interesting.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us about how you received your citation?
I really don't know, except there were so many things that happened in this same period of time, and this was one of them. This was when we caught up behind the enemy, and then we finally the enemy got off to the right. We went to the left, and I don't know what town we went to, but we got by the enemy really, and we turned to the left, and E Company, F Company, tanks, light tank, was with us, and Lieutenant Finn was an 88, but it was facing the other way, and he ran his tank right down. He turned around. By the time the boy cranked that 88 around, it hit the side of the tank. He couldn't get to him, so he captured him, and he held that corner, and we went around, and we found a path. Now, that's one thing that I remember quite well. It was a path with trees about this high, I guess. It was on the map. And we went over the Audubon. And when it came out and went across the Audubon, we were really behind a lot of the troops that had gone the other way. German troops that had gone the other way. And then we dropped down right on a hard service road, and that's when we got all that supply line. And really, between the Air Force and what we were hitting, we wiped out, I don't have any idea how many vehicles we knocked out, or how many horses were killed, or how many people were captured. But there was a lot of them. Just one instance I remember, we had a boy named Wainwright, who was a sergeant, platoon sergeant. And we captured a supply battalion, I reckon it was, and about 300 men in it. And the colonel surrendered with his, had on his riding boots and a sandbound belt and all, and he presented it to me, and so we told him, that he could leave his horse and the boy could take care of his horse, but he had to take his troops back down the road, so he lined them all up, and he was marching down the road. And we were sitting on the front of a Jeep, and Wainwright said, "Where's he going?" I said, "I have not the slightest idea in the world. But he's going because he's marching. He's got the whole battalion going down the road." And it wasn't that the troops within 20 miles of us at all. I don't know where the poor man went. I don't know where he took his poor battalion. But those things happen, you know, and the only thing that happened that whole, well, with that battalion, they threw one hand grenade, and we caught it and threw it up on the bank, and it went off, and not a thing ever got, no one got a scratch. It wasn't but 10 of us in there to start with, but everybody was somewhere else, you know. The thing was that everybody was doing their thing, and one wasn't doing it more than the other one. And it wasn't a question that, you know, I was out here doing this and you were doing something else. We were all doing the same thing, you know, and you could always line it up. It was the Recon, and it was the infantry, it was the tanks. And if the infantry got back down, the tanks had to take over, and we were back out of there if we could get out. And so it wasn't a question of who was out front. The Recon was out front most of the time until the situation was developed, and they got back, and then the others did the dirty work, unless we had to. I don't know whether I'm helping you anything.
You are helping so much, so much. You mentioned the last day of the war. How far in advance did you realize that the war was coming to an end?
We were in southern Germany. I'm trying to name a little town, but I'm sorry.
Sorry.
My wife says it's pitiful. I couldn't find a way home. She didn't help me. But it was 3 divisions that hit this one town at the same time. The 12th Armored, some infantry division, and I believe it was the 10th, 12th, 4th, I don't know, another armored division. But we hit the same town at the same time. And they were trying to get into Innsbruck. Well, I happened to draw the mission to try to go see how far I could go down that mountain road to Innsbruck. And I didn't get about 4 or 5 miles. I couldn't go. The road was blown. And I bypassed one and I hit another until finally the whole bank, you know, was torn out and you just couldn't go any further. And I came back and I reported to the whole staff. They were in a big warehouse upstairs, I'll never forget it. And I reported to them, you know, what I had found and the fact that they couldn't go the short route to Innsbruck. They would have to go around by Munich or by the lakes up in that area. And how surprised I was when these generals are talking and they say, well, you know, the war is just about over. You know, and I guess what we ought to do is to go ahead on and make some arrangements with Russia now, and say maybe we can go ahead and fight Russia and get this over with, because we'll have to do it someday. And I almost fell on the floor. You know, don't you talk about fighting anybody. I don't want to get this thing over and go home. You know, I didn't tell anybody that, you know what, I'm just, but that was my first experience of getting close to the end of the war. And that was really about the end of the last experience that we had in fighting. We had a few days after that, but it wasn't any great length of time.
Did you guys celebrate, or did you?
Really, no. Because as soon as the war was over, it wasn't anybody in Europe that was at home. Everybody was away from home. And they all wanted to go home. And so the roads were crowded and everybody was trying to go, and we were moving everything back and forth and trying to get people back and forth home, and then we had to inventory everything. So really we didn't we had several nice places that we stayed in while we were doing that. And I went back to this town that just for curiosity, riding through the town that we blew this ammunition up on this bridge that we captured or this hospital was in, and the people recognized me. And they gave me a radio and gave me all that stuff. They thought I was the king or something. I got the biggest kick out of it. But really, it wasn't any great celebration. I guess we had a few beers. I wouldn't say we didn't have a few drinks and that in, but it wasn't a great celebration. And then we went back to Heidenheim, and I don't know too much about that because shortly after that, I was transferred to the 1st Armored Division because I had too many points to go back overseas, but not quite enough to go home. And they put me in the 1st to go home, and I wound up with half my same unit that I had in the 12th in the 1st. And then I really had fun in 1979. In 1979, I went to Louisville to my first reunion, and I met these people who I couldn't place, and yet they knew everything that I knew, and they were not my drivers. They were my drivers, but I couldn't place them as drivers. They were my people, but they weren't my people. I couldn't figure what was going on. And finally, they said, well, we weren't in the 12th with you, we were in the 1st. You know. They were in the 92nd, but they were not in my particular, in the D battery. Yeah. And, you know, they knew everything I knew, but I didn't know how I knew everything, you know. It was really interesting. Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with the concentration camps?
Nothing except Landsberg. And I really didn't know until a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, that we took a part of the concentration camp. And when we got there, the camp was A-frames, was still burning. We captured a couple of sergeants were trying to get away. The prisoners, people in the camp were standing on a board and had a couple of prisoners underneath that they killed and stuck under there. And the whole rank of the people dead along the railroad track, and we had the medics we were trying to decipher who was living, who was not, who to try to help, who not. And we found one I never will forget, over in the woods, and all he could do was to blink his eyes. The only movement that he made was his eyes. And of course the medics came, but the excitement, and that ended. He died in a few seconds after the medics got there. But that part we had, and that night my little platoon had to stay as guard, and I had to go back to division headquarters and make a report. And a boy named Ely was my jeep driver, and when we got back, none of us could eat, you know. And when we would stay in a little old barn, and we roll out a bedroll, and when I did a bottle of whiskey, I'll never forget it. I happened to have a bottle of whiskey in my bedroll. And I said, hey boys, we got it made. And we all drank that bottle of whiskey. I remember that. And the next morning, we had everybody there, all the generals and even the Clark and French general and I don't know, about 5 or 6 of them there. They took over and I disappeared real quick.
So,
But that's the only thing I had to do. Did you ever meet this man, Joe Marks or something from California?
I don't recall it. We probably have.
He was a youth in the concentration camp, in this concentration camp. And see, he called all of us before we went to. Lord, I got to get out of here. He called us all at home, and we couldn't figure who he was, but he had our name and who we were. And he wanted to know if we were the first ones there. Well, I don't know whether I was the first one there, and I know our platoon was the first one there. And but when he came, and we met him in Chicago, when we had a reunion in Chicago, but when we got to talking to him, we found out that it wasn't just one. We were in this camp, but somebody else was in that camp, and we found out it was 11 or 12 different camps. So we don't know which camp he was in, and we don't know who was at first. It could have been 10 people at first, 10 different units at one time. So anyone could tell you that I was there first and been correct, and we were all wrong because we didn't know. And I don't know what I think he was trying to write a book. I'm not sure, but he was a Polish, and he and his father, and he was just a young boy, and he and his father were put in there, and he was only about 14 or 15 when the war ended, and I think he came to the United States and finished his high school education. But I had a chance to talk to him a couple of times, which was very interesting.
So what did you do when the war ended? You didn't have enough points, so where did you go?
First Armored Division.
Yes.
I had B Troop, still in the armor, and still in the Recon. I was B Troop of the 81st Cavalry.
And how long were you with them?
Till August to January, February, about 6 months. And then I went home.
And how was that? Did you have a nice reunion, or?
Yeah, I liked that. Yeah, I went home after that, and I didn't have any big trouble. A lot of people had trouble adjusting, but I never found that a big problem. I'd had 2 years of college, and there wasn't any great problem for me to go back to school. I had a GI Bill. My father was still farming. I helped him get his crops in for that year. My brother had come back home from the service. And I just went off to school, and I took a lot of credits, and that was in '46, I guess. Started in June of '46, and finished July of '47. I got 2 years in. Took a lot of credits. Illegal. Don't try it. I took 27 hours one semester, and don't ever try it. Not that you have too much trouble with the subjects, but you do with the professors and the dean. He always said, no, you can't do that. No, I was taking practice teaching, which was 15 hours. And after being in the service for almost 5 years, teaching every day.
Yeah.
Practice teaching wasn't a great problem.
No. Huh.
And I enjoyed it. And I only had 3 hours of teaching, a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an automobile. So I taught and got an automobile. And it was in the afternoon. I had classes in the morning. In the afternoon, I taught. And then after classes, I had to sit up with the professor to start the class 10 minutes late. And I always got there in time, so I took a late class with it. I don't know how I did it, but
I don't either.
I didn't have to go. Then I got married.
Good.
Stayed married for 50 years to the same woman.
Oh.
Now that is a job. And he's talking about it.
Yeah.
And I can tell him that's a long road.
Yeah, but wasn't it worth it though?
Ooh, I'm not going to get in that department.
Oh. Okay. How
Sure.
many kids did you have?
Children?
Children.
She. My wife had 2. I hope they're mine. But they're not right, I'm sure. Yeah, 2.
Oh, you're a comedian.
Don't tell my wife I said that. I have two lovely girls. They've been wonderful.
Good.
Whatever trouble they've been in, they never bothered me with it. And I never found out about it. So I guess you'd say that another A for them.
Yeah.
Both of them graduated from college. One of them married and has a daughter. And the other one is single. One lives in Williamsburg, Virginia, and the other one lives in Montana. And that's what you call one part of the country to the other.
Really?
Both very independent. And one graduated with William and Mary. She taught for a while, and then she and her husband run a restaurant. And she's as crazy as a bedbug. Anybody that runs a restaurant and got sense enough. She has a lovely daughter who's a junior at University of Alabama. No, University of Georgia. University of Georgia. The other one is a CPA. Has a degree in teaching, in counseling, master's in counseling, and another CPA. And so she managed a hotel. She loves hotel management. She's been in that ever since she finished high school, college with him. And the group she works with, they build a hotel, then she sets up and starts the whole thing in operation, and then she goes back to the original one in Billings, Montana, the small one. And then they build another one, she goes and sets them up and train the staff and comes back. And I asked her if she gets some stock in each one. She said, oh, no. I said, you're crazy. I think she does now, but they didn't first.
Yeah. Huh. Well, is there any other story that we missed that you'd like to get on tape?
If I told it to you, you wouldn't want to hear it on tape. Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you,
Okay.
and I'm not going to say any more. I've talked too much already.
Okay. Did you have any questions?
I hope I've been able to help a little bit. I just want, one of the things I want to impress on, and I'm really serious, that when any one unit tries to tell you that they did it all, you can just say that the guy's doing too much talking, because they were pretty much leveled that everybody did basically the same thing, except at different places. Now, I sent some maps down to y'all last year, and it was maps of the old Combat Command, you know, while we were, this was Combat Command B, this was Combat Command C and A, and this was B, this is C, and this is D, this is line. And what, you know, while we were actually in combat.
Good.
And I opened up a book one time, I opened up a map, and the whole thing's in it. And I'd had a need for them, so I sent them to y'all. Oh, really, I gave them to you. I brought them to wherever we were last year. Or year before last. I don't know which it was.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
anyway, y'all got them.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
ma'am. And